It's time to take a closer look at the 2024 NHL Draft Class as we talk with Hadi Kalakeche about the draft class and Utah's MO and whether or not we should still follow it to decide who they might pick once again at 6th overall.
You are Locked On NHL in Utah, your daily podcast on all things hockey in Utah, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everybody. This is Locked On NHL in Utah, your daily podcast on all things hockey in Utah and the new NHL hockey team in your state of Utah. I'm your host, Robyn Leano. We got a great episode on today's episode. Wanting to thank everyone for making this show your first listen every day. Free and available everywhere. Like I said, got a great episode. We got Hadi Kalakeche of Dobber Prospects and Locked On NHL Prospects to talk about this upcoming draft, get a little more in depth, try to get some more info rather than just me spewing stats on off of a page. You know, Hadi's got a lot more info, a lot more knowledge about what's coming up this way.
Absolutely, yes. It's a fun class. It's been great to follow them all year. I'll be going to the draft, just really fun. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about these guys. I've been following them all year.
Oh, you're saying you're going to be out there. I'm sure you'll be excited to check out the Sphere in Las Vegas, huh?
Absolutely. That's going to be a blast.
I actually tried to see if I can get myself in there, but like I was even talking about getting plans. I was like, oh, I got my hotel set. But I had to cancel my plans because, well, let's just say I have a personal tournament in Minnesota in about the month, like the 2 months after that I'm saving up money for instead. So
got it. Makes sense for sure.
But let's get to let's get to this. Let's talk about first getting a closer look at the 2024 NHL Draft Class. One thing I mentioned on last week's show was that it's not like the last couple ones where you probably know what your top five, like this is more of like your top one as the last couple years have shown, but I think what was like 2 through 10 can really be a toss-up.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a wide open class after one. I think there's a clear kind of 2 through 6 or 7, and in that glut you can put anyone at second and it works out. But if you ask me, I think there's a clear number 2. It depends on who you ask. There's a lot of risk around Russia and all that. A lot of people are a bit more hesitant on some prospects out of Russia there, but I have no hesitation when it comes to Ivan Demidov. For me, he's a step above the rest of the class at second overall there. But then after that, I mean, Kaden Lindstrom, Artem Levshinov, Anton Salayev. You can even throw Zeev Buyam, Zane Parekh, maybe even Konsta Helenius, and obviously Kaden Lindstrom and Berkeley Cann. There's just a glut of names after 2 that you can look at. But if you ask me, number 2 is clear for me. It's Ivan Demidov. He's different. He's next level.
Yeah, you mentioned the the hesitation around Russia, and I want to talk about that a little bit more in depth in a little bit. But kind of want to briefly mention, I'm pretty sure you already know that Bill Armstrong has shown he is not afraid of getting a player from Russia.
Absolutely, and I don't think any team should. I mean, the track record, especially among the top, first round prospects out of Russia, I can't name you the last one that didn't come over. So it's just. I feel like the risk there is overblown, but it is especially overblown when it comes to Ivan Demidov. He's already refused to sign an extension in Russia, and if you ask me, I think it's by punishment that he spent the whole year in the MHL, which is Russia's junior league. He has no business in that league. He was at 2 points a game,
right,
dominating every single game. He's too good for that league. I think he should have been playing KHL minutes, just like Matvei Michkov did in his draft year. He went out on loan. I think a similar arrangement would have been great. But yeah, here we are. Ivan Demidov spent the whole year in the MHL undeservedly. This kid's ridiculous.
Tell me a little more about the expectation of Demidov, and I know, like I said, he's like almost like the killer number 2. So the chance of him falling to 6 for Utah to even get the opportunity to draft him probably pretty low, especially because you're talking going through 2, 3, 4, and 5. But tell me a little bit about him to kind of give us an understanding of where we are in these in this year of draft.
Yeah, for sure. So Ivan Demidov is the best stick handler I've seen, that I've personally scouted. I started in 2018, so that includes Jack Hughes, that includes Connor Bedard. He's better than them stick handling wise. At Dobber Prospects, you have a 10 an out of 10 grade scale. He's the only prospect who's received a 10 in any tool, and it's a stick handling ability. It's not just the handling skill, it's also the creativity. This is a player who finds solutions that no one else sees. It's quite simple. He can be on his knees on the ice. The puck's on the edge of his stick, and he'll just get up in one motion. He'll put it through a defender's stick. He'll get around them, make another deke, get to the net. Like, he's just oozes creativity and skill. But on top of that, great shot, great passing, an amazing thinker of the game as well. And I don't think his defensive game gets enough, credit. He's a very effortful defensive player. He's not necessarily the smartest or the most composed or the most aware defensive player. I don't think he's going to become a defensive ace at the NHL level, but the effort's there. He's engaged, and he puts in second and third efforts on the back check, on the forecheck, you name it. So there are so many different areas that can hit with Demidov. The biggest of which is his stick handling ability, but beyond that, he's got the complete offensive toolkit with some energy and effort and some defensive awareness to spare.
Hey, defensive awareness is all. I mean, I think that's the thing that a lot of people need out of a player, because I think that's something that a lot of that is going unnoticed these days.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. I think that, especially in public sphere, I'd say NHL teams absolutely adore defensive awareness and put a lot of focus on players who are defensively capable, which is why I think Anton Saliev's in the conversation at as high as third overall. Same for Artyom Levshinov. Even Konstant Helenius is being talked about as a top 5 prospect. It's because these guys are defensively aware and capable. I think if you ask the public, it's just, let's go for the highest skill guy. Let's go for the player with the most offensive upside. But I think that, NHL teams must value that. I mean, that's why I think that at the time, Arizona went for Dmitry Simashev, because he's got a bunch of that.
And it's interesting. I want to go back to that really quick, because last year's draft, I think when the mock draft came out, and I had then Arizona picking Dmitry Simashev, I think it was later. It was like I had him pick in the 12th pick or whatever it was down there. And people were surprised, like, are you sure it's Simashev? And I'm like, yeah, no, based off at least what I've read. And that's not even me doing all the research. Based off what I've just been able to see, it makes sense. It made sense for a team like Arizona to take it. And I guess people just don't look at that, because I think everyone lately has been only focused on NHLE, which I think has been crazy. But
yeah, absolutely. I think there's an over reliance on that. I mean, NHLE is a great tool in order to find value later on in picks. I'd say in the first round, you have to do your due diligence, because there are prospects like Dmitry Simashev, like David Reinbacher, who don't have the highest NHLE because they're facing pro competition as defensemen. It's still a part of NHLE that I think isn't necessarily polished enough in order to make high-end decisions on that end. NHLE is just taking a league's points average and kind of valuating up to what it would be in the NHL, which is an extremely difficult thing to do, because there are a billion factors that go into production. A player's usage, his ice time, the way the playing style that the player plays, the way that they handle themselves on and off the ice. There are so many different factors, and I think that's where scouting comes in. I think analytics give you the what, and scouting gives you the why. And that's why it's so important to kind of watch the players, just to understand, okay, why is his NHLE so low, and should I be concerned? I think that's a part of the due diligence that teams make, and I think that Simashev was a great pick where the Coyotes picked him up.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockdown to make every playoff shot count. I know if you guys have heard me say multiple times, but I've made my bet already for these Stanley Cup playoffs, picking the Dallas Stars to win the Stanley Cup. And you can make a pick too like that once again at FanDuel. It's FanDuel.com/lockdown, America's #1 sportsbook. So let's talk about now, going, a little bit more on this year and the needs that Utah is going to be looking for, and what they're going to try to acquire in this upcoming draft, specifically with their 6th overall pick. Just about every single mock draft that I've seen, it seems that they have excuse me, I was going to say Arizona again. They've had Utah picking a defenseman, and to me, I mean, at least on my end, it makes sense. I know that Utah has needs defensemen. What's your perspective on this, and where do you view Utah's needs?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the defense would be a great option to add someone in there. On left D, you've got Simishev, who's looking really interesting. I think on the right side of D, there are some options that are really interesting in this draft. If Artyom Levshinov slips to 6, I don't know what I'll do. I'd be extremely surprised. But if it's not Levshinov, I don't think Anton Salayev gets past Utah. He's exactly what they like. Massive, literally the biggest prospect in the 2024 NHL draft. Yeah. But on top of that, he's just a player that big should not be skating that well. It's just not fair. It's like you watch him play and you're just amazed at the fluidity of his edge work. His body proportion isn't unbalanced as we usually see with 6'7" players. Players that big usually have some lankiness, have some weirdness to their frame and the way that their proportions are built that makes it a bit more difficult for them to build up speed, to be more agile, to use their knees in extensions and pivots and all that. None of that's a problem with Salayev. He skates better than most defensemen in this class. And that combination of size, reach, physicality, and skating, I think he could be one of the best gap closing defensemen in world hockey. Like, he's that good at that specific thing. My concern is with handling pressure, all that stuff. But these are things you can work with. I'm a bit lower on Salayev because of these problems, because I see him as bigger problems than others maybe do. But if it's not Levshinov or Salayev, Zane Parekh for me is the best defenseman in this class, at least the highest upside defenseman in this class. I mean, he almost scored, I think he scored 30 goals this season in the OHL, but beyond that, it's just an amazing passer, so confident and calm with the puck. Sometimes it's a problem, actually. Sometimes the best thing to do on the ice is just to throw the puck out of pressure. He still has to figure that part out. But the offense with Parekh is off the charts. And I think that if at 6th overall you're looking at a right-handed defenseman, Zane Parekh is exactly, I think, what this new Utah team needs. An injection of pure skill, a defenseman who could potentially reach a point per game. Like, he's that good offensively. He does have his defensive shortcomings. They're not as massive as I think people have made him out to be. But overall, I think that the best option for Utah, if Levshinov's off the board in terms of what they're looking for, Zane Parech's basically exactly what Dmitry Simishev needs and what Utah needs as an organization.
One of the things I want to touch on, and I'm glad you mentioned those players, and it's because I feel like that's the huge thing. When you mentioned Salayev, you talked about him being, for example, the biggest player, and just sheer size in this draft class. And that fits that fits just what the profile that Bill Armstrong has been taking the last couple of years. How much stock are you taking? Obviously, one into size for knowing Bill Armstrong's MO as well as physicality.
Yeah, so if that's the MO, which I'd expect it to be, I mean, that was extremely clear in last year's draft. Artyom Levshinov's Anton Salayev are the two culprits I think that are most likely to get picked by Bill Armstrong if they're available. But I think there's a likelihood that they're both picked before 6. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think Montreal's definitely going for a forward. You can count them out of that. But I think Columbus is gonna have a huge look at Anton Salayev and Artyom Levshinov and pick the best of the two. I think they're probably going to go Salayev if he's available. Then outside of that, I think Chicago could pick Levshinov. They really need a right-handed D in the system. And I'm kind of blanking on who's at 3. Anaheim. Anaheim also needs right-handed defensemen after losing Jamie Drysdale there. So take your pick there. I think Levshinov or Salayev could be gone, which frees up those other options. So I think personally, I prefer Zane Parekh and Zeev Buyam are the two that I'd be looking at if I'm Arizona. It's just they're undersized. So the next best option at that point, if you're looking for true size, Sam Dickinson is exactly that. He's a left-handed defenseman, sure, but he slots into the system really well. He's a really mature and physically developed skater. One of the best skaters, again, in this draft class, really fluid, really agile for his size, and has some sneaky offensive upside. I think that, he put up 70 points in 68 games in the OHL from the second power play rather for London. So you can tell there's a bit more offense there. I think he needs to reel in the aggression. He's aggressive on both sides of the ice, but if you can figure that out, I think he's a great option for Utah.
Yeah, maybe like that's one of the things I was considering is I saw that in Sam Dickinson. It's like, oh, he's got that, in which he's got that a physicality, but then you mentioned, like, oh, he's a little bit, could be a little bit too much. Maybe, like, again, maybe the development can, in the on the bigger leagues can help reel him in. I think that would be the hope. Sam Dickinson was a player that I liked, and I'm glad that you mentioned his name as well. There again, you've already mentioned so many of the names that I've wanted that I feel like everyone's asked about, right? Everyone said, all right, it's going to be one of these players. And like I said, and like we've been talking about, it's like, I feel like it just feels like a defenseman is the way to go. And these players all fit that MO, all fit the profile of what Utah needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the draft to pick up a defenseman. There are so many good options. So right now, in my top 15, I have Zane Parekh, Ziv Buyam, Sam Dickinson, Anton Salayev, Artyom Levshinov. That's 5 options you have in there that you can select from and make into a really good defenseman. I think all 5 of those guys have top 4 potential. So picking around 6, especially with the 4s available in this class, I think going with a deep defenseman at 6 makes a lot of sense. But Caden Lindstrom also fits the MO very, very well for Utah there.
Oh yeah, and there's another option there too. Another player, kind of on a whole other side note, I want to ask about, because someone asked me about this, because I just want to get your thoughts on it real quick, because someone's asked about it. It doesn't necessarily fit the exact profile that Utah's looking for, but someone's like, hey, what are the chances that Utah picks a player like Iginla?
Iginla would be a great option. He's actually at 6 overall in my rankings, which makes a lot of sense for me for Arizona. He doesn't fit the big boy MO, but he's still very capable along the boards. And he's better along the boards than most players who are 5-6 inches taller than him. He's not that small either. He's 6 foot, 180 pounds. And he looks bigger, honestly. If you watch him on the ice, the way he uses his frame, the way he separates from the boards to find space in the middle of the ice offensively, it's the best in this class, genuinely, that board game. On top of that, you have a player who scored, 40-something goals in 60 games in the WHL. He's definitely a shooter, but I think his passing is going underrated as well. He's a really good distributor of the puck. He's really skilled, really smart, extremely intelligent. So I think that he would be a great option at 6 overall if you're not going defenseman. For me, it's between Caden Lindstrom and TJ Iginla in terms of the best fits with what Utah's trying to build in that system.
And that makes sense. The only reason why I brought that name up too, obviously, other than being asked about it, was a lot of people were telling us, like, hey, can you imagine this? Just the thought of Doan and Iginla being on the same team. You're talking about two last names who transcended the 2000s and early 2010s to become where they are now. Where their kids are now on one team. It would be an interesting storyline, but I'm glad that you mentioned that there are other players out there who probably could fit the MO a little bit better, but who knows where, because like you said, Iginla's right there at your number 6 spot on your board.
Yeah, absolutely. He's really, really interesting. In terms of, obviously the board game's great. Like I said, it's the best board game in this class. The shot's great and all that. I think there are he's got the same issue as Sam Dickinson, which is very interesting because Dickinson's a defenseman and Iginla's a winger right now, but it's the same issue of being overly aggressive. In Iginla's case, the way it shows up is that on the back check, he can overskate his lanes because he's trying to get back too fast, actually. So what happens is he frees up space behind him to hit a trailer, the fourth forward, as we call the defenseman, joining the rush. He'll sometimes omit that option. But when he gets the puck, the awareness, the intelligence, the decision-making is so, so, so good. And he's a player who's rocketed up the boards as the year's gone on. He was in my 20s at the start of the year, and by the end of it, he's at 6 overall. And there's a good reason for that. He's shown more and more and more with each month passing.
A more general question I have in regards to really could apply to any of the players we talked about today, or just a general sense of this draft class. and I'm not saying for the sake of, hey, maybe this is something that something Arizona can go, or to keep doing it again, that Utah can go for. Like I said, I'm going to be making that mistake for at least a couple times for the next
So
few
am I.
weeks.
Don't worry about it.
That Utah's going to be that would be looking for, because I don't think they're in a rush to do it. But is there any one of these players that you would say is the most NHL ready now?
Of the players we've mentioned, I would say that it probably would have to be Sam Dickinson. I think that Sam Dickinson is close enough to what NHL teams want right away in order to play on a bottom pair immediately. Next up, not far behind, would be Artyom Levshinov. I think both of them have their decision-making issues, but on a bottom pair, tools matter a bit more than pure hockey sense and awareness and decision-making. So I think that those two would be in that running. But in terms of players in this class, overall, in terms of NHL readiness, Michael Brunsack-Newgard takes the cake for me. Outside of Macklin Celebrini, he's the next guy. He could have played on a fourth line in the NHL this year. Like he's that NHL ready. Really defensively aware. He's a big winger, 6'1", 200 pounds, playing in the Swedish second division. He's playing for Norway right now in the World Championship, the Men's World Championships. And yeah, just a good shooter with really good defensive value. He doesn't have the highest upside, but like I said, he could play in the NHL tomorrow.
Those are all good to know. And like I said, it's not like Utah is going to be worried about that for anytime soon. They're still focused on,
for sure,
on building for the future and not now. But it's always good to know what's coming up their way and what's what we could potentially see in the next year. One more thing I want to get out of you, and this is a little bit more of a wild card. Is there anyone that potentially that hasn't been talked about that could be either a late round first, a second round pick who maybe no one's talking about right now, who very well could just steal the show?
For sure. I think that, Michael Hage has started to become a name people talk about. He's in most top 25s at this point. So I would omit him from this conversation. I just wanted to give him a bit of love because he's a really interesting prospect.
Right.
But I think John Mustard, who plays for Waterloo in the USHL, is a player that I don't think gets talked about enough. He's really young for the class. He's an August 2006 birthday, the same age as T. Gunla. And with John Mustard, you've got a player who's got blinding speed and has one of the best curl and drag wristers in the class. My problem is that he doesn't do much outside of that, which is why he's not a bona fide first rounder. I think he's more of an early second, mid second, but I think the team that picks him up is going to be really surprised with what he turns into over the years. He's got great qualities, and he combines that skating speed with that curl and drag wrister really well. He's able to shoot in motion extremely well, which means that once he gets a defenseman beat on the zone entry, the puck's usually hitting the back of the net, which makes him really interesting. Outside of that, though, I think Luke Misa isn't getting enough love. I have him personally in my top 32, but I know I think it was like 70th on U.S. Central on NHL Central Scouting's North American list of skaters, which means that that would usually put him in the 120 to 150 range, which just doesn't make sense to me because he's defensively responsible. He's one of the paciest prospects in the draft, and he's really good in terms of playmaking. So that combination usually lands you in the first round. I have trouble understanding why he's that low on NHL Central Scouting's list, which means that he might be available in the third, fourth, fifth round, and I think it'd be a fantastic pickup. He doesn't fit the MO of Utah. He's an undersized, speedy, skilled center, but I think you need balance. You need a combination of size and skill. And if you're gonna have a draft like last year, where I think every single pick apart from one was above 6'3", you can afford to have like one or two smaller skill guys. I mean, Matthias Michelli and Clayton Keller were two of the best players on that Arizona team last season. You need some combo. I think you can include one more small guy in there. And if it was me, I would hedge my bet on Luke Misa in the third, fourth round, because he's probably going to be available in that range.
Yeah, heck, Logan Cooley wasn't even the biggest guy on the ice, but he was. He made a lot of noise. I mean, obviously, like I made the joke a couple years ago. If they didn't pick Logan Cooley, like that would have been even though they're looking for size, that they would have been the dumbest decision ever.
For sure.
And it's showing. All right, kind of like final thought I want to get from you, just kind of more of like tie it up with the bow, kind of what we're talking about. You're Bill Armstrong for Utah right now, and you're on the clock. Who you like? Just like like who do you like? Who's Utah taking?
At 6th overall, Zane Parekh. I've been oscillating on him between 3rd and 4th overall all year, behind Celebrini and Demidov, and kind of tied neck and neck with Caden Lindstrom. I think Parekh fits the needs of this up and coming Utah team more than Caden Lindstrom does, even though Caden Lindstrom fits the MO. So it's I think it's going to be a battle between the MO and the need, and I feel that at this point, Utah's added enough big boys in order to afford a player as skillful and as offensively gifted as Zane Parekh on that back end. So he would be my guy. And then in the late 1st, early 2nd, I would start tackling more the MO guys, the big guys who can move the puck, who have some skill. And I feel like there's one player who I think might very well be available then, but he's a 2004 birthday. He turned 20 this year. His name's Jesse Polkinen. He's a 6'6", 216-pound left-handed defenseman playing in the Finnish Pro League, and has been just lights out. And what makes him really interesting is, for me, he's this year's unicorn. The best big guy in terms of pure skill, I think, on the back end in this draft. His ability to just pull off moves that you wouldn't expect a 6'6" defenseman to do. Like, I've seen him go between the legs, spinoramas on zone entries. He's a really interesting, really daring, really skillful defenseman. And on top of that, he has the mobility and the defensive awareness and the reach in order to be impactful defensively. So if he's available in the late 1st, early 2nd, I wouldn't put it past Utah and Bill Armstrong to make that pick. And I think I would as well.
I mean, based off what you just said there, like, I think Bill Armstrong hasn't also put it past drafting overagers in the past either. Like, we've seen he's done it multiple times in just the last couple of years, and why not do it again? Why not do it again for someone that based off the description you've said, so it completely makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, Hadi, for coming on. How can everyone find you, your work, podcast, and anything else?
Absolutely. So wherever you're listening to this or watching this, you'll look up Locked On NHL Prospects. You'll find Sebastian and I talking in too much detail about prospects 5 days a week. And if you're looking for my personal work or just the one-stop shop for everything I do, if you're watching on YouTube, my Twitter handle is right below my face. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, it's HadiK_scouting. That's HADIK_scouting. That's where you find everything I post.
Awesome, Hadi. Well, thanks again once again for coming on, and thanks everyone for tuning into this episode of Locked On NHL in Utah. We all hope that you enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, don't forget to leave a comment, give us a like, give us a subscribe if you've yet to already. We're available everywhere you get your podcast, including on YouTube, SiriusXM, also ad-free on Amazon Music. Don't forget to interact with us on social media. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/LockedOnNHL in Utah, and on Twitter, is now known as X, at LO_NHL Utah. I am personally at Robyn_Leano. You can interact with us, ask a question you might have. We might answer right back. We're in a future episode of the Locked On NHL in Utah podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to today's episode. We'll see y'all next time.